And we're recording. Hello, everybody.
So, yeah, this thing is like the fifth week in a row where we get to say that things have been absolutely crazy and they've been crazier than they were the week before. And I think you'll understand why when we get to the point where, well, I think I'll just say one of our stories right out. Negative interest rates around Europe are probably not the craziest story.
Try negative interest rates worldwide.
And that's probably not the craziest story.
Yeah, and just for some context, that has never happened before in pretty much all of recorded history. So this is not only going, this is we're at the point where this is like confirmed, going to be a historically bad depression, and it's going to occur worldwide. So, what most people would characterize as a global market collapse.
Terms to describe what's about to happen. I mean, I think the best words we can use is global market collapse, but you can hear the mainstream media and second stream media calling it an imminent recession. Now, a recession describes like a market slowdown, if I recall correctly. I don't remember what the specific
Yeah.
definition is, but it's sort of like think persistent market or think of persistent GDP action over like 3 months or something. That's a recession.
Yeah, you're cutting out, so I find that very
Let me
interesting.
just
I start recording, and yeah, that starts happening all of a sudden. It's not. I'm not.
uh,
I'm not inferring anything. It's just I find that
yeah.
interesting.
I'm just looking up the definition of a recession real quick because a recession is considered to be a more mild form of a depression. And I think a depression is going to be a very mild form of what's coming. I don't know if you've heard the term hard reset, but that is almost certainly what's going to happen. In 2008, we had the real estate bubble that burst. Here, we not only have a real estate bubble, we have a student loan bubble, we have an auto loan bubble, we have a debt bubble, we have a currency bubble, we have an everything bubble. Anything, and with negative interest rates, the government is going to continue trying to inflate these bubbles. What lower interest rates do is of course encourage people to spend, encourage people to take out loans. With negative interest rates, as opposed to you paying the bank interest, they pay you to take out the loan. The whole point is to encourage people to spend the money they have rather than save it. And when they do that, they buy goods and services, and that's supposed to circulate around the economy. The theory goes that the amount of circulation will more than offset the damage that's going to be done by inflation, which, of course, if you're a Keynesian or a fan of modern monetary theory, inflation's not really that big of a problem. But I think if you're listening to this, you know better. And well, we already have a massive currency bubble. The only reason that the United
Yeah.
States hasn't gotten into inflation or hyperinflation yet is because of currency recycling through the system of the petrodollars, which of course that's starting to crack very hard as well.
Yeah, more countries are starting to get around this by trying to create their own fiat, their own reserve-backed currencies specifically for the oil market. And then there's of course cryptocurrency, which subverts pretty much the entire system. So,
It's
but
to
certainly, um, yeah, it's not. I mean, this isn't really the only sign of a coming global depression. I mean, as we've been covering over the last few months here, there have been, yeah, there have been thousands of stores closing in pretty much every industry worldwide. So those aren't like thousands of jobs. I mean, those are entire stores closing. Multiple companies filing Chapter 11 or looking like they're going to. A lot of people were devastated when Toys R Us closed down. but that one actually, could probably be explained by other factors than a looming recession as well. Then there's also, but yeah, it's mostly occurring in finance, and that this is where a lot of the larger indicators is in the banking industry, and with a lot of what's going on with loans, which Filthy briefly touched upon it. The sort of Keynesian idea behind their sort of general theory, and quick, simple refutation. Productive exchanges create wealth, are the only way of creating wealth, actually. And without wealth, you can't have consumption or production because you have no resources to consume or produce with.
We're already seeing the lack of consumption if the 12,000 stores that are closing is any indication. People just don't have the money. They've blown through all those savings and now they're just putting everything that they can into debt, which is, of course, the absolute last place you want to be in this coming market collapse, given that the way it's going to happen is that banks are going to call in all their debts. They're going to have all of your assets taken from you. The
But
people,
Filthy,
you're going to want to pay off your debt as quickly as possible, I think.
But Filthy, California has a higher GDP than any other place in the world. GDP is the only measurement of growth.
Oh, it's the only one? Really? Even more than GNP? Or,
I'm just making fun of them.
I know. But people are going to say GDP. Just remember that GDP counts government spending. So, like, what is percentage of government spending what is government spending as a percentage of GDP? Isn't it like 30% now?
Yeah, it's getting like ridiculously high. Like World War II, when that was going on, it's almost that high at this point.
And we're not even at war yet. I mean, not a kind of World War II total war.
Oh, but you can guarantee once the economy collapses, these hollow states which are left are going to attempt to feebly start a world war with one another to try and will try and set up these war economy policies. Of course, the difference though between now and history is now we have encrypted ledgers and computers, and we have all these commodities and networks which undermine these structures. So, will the state be able to sustain these? Nah, because it entirely relies upon the state's ability to continue obtaining and coercing resources from the population that they rule over. Without that, these are just empty loans, and the bankers who write them can't even profit.
Yeah, if there's dead air, it's because I really don't have anything to add. Suffice to say, 3 things you're going to want to do if you want to prepare for this. Well, actually, many things. But the number one most important thing is get out of debt. You don't want to have it. After that, buying crypto and buying precious metals is going to be definitely what you're going to want to do. That will put you miles and miles ahead of the average person. Now, there's a whole bunch of other things you can do as well, as stocking up, doing a bit of prepping, as the normies would call it, getting non-perishables, having a stockpile of those. The important thing is to have enough to last you 3 days, though the longer it will last you, the better. And non-perishables includes things like cereal, water bottles, canned foods, rice. Rice can be very cheap to get in a bag, and also just pasta in general. Also, be sure to get a fire starting kit if you can, first aid kit. Those you can usually get for like $20 at a grocery store.
Yeah, I'm in $0 of debt. I'm currently self-employed, growing microgreens and selling 3D prints, and on top of that, I have a couple $100 in cryptocurrency. So I don't know about you, but I'd say that I am pretty much set.
I have thousands of dollars in cryptocurrency and precious metals, and I'm currently growing bananas. In terms of employment, I am not self-employed, though as much as I'd like to be. And yeah, I think I've got some amount of assets and zero debt. Don't even have a credit card.
Wage cuck.
It's true, but I mean, it's actually getting me money, so I'm not really bad. Plus, I mean, when you realize like what it is that I actually do, it's actually kind of awesome. But I'm not going to say what we do, let alone on stream. But anyways,
Fair enough, but that's something I guess I'd advise. Most people, you want to become self-sufficient. That's an easier way to sustain yourselves and also to obtain a consistent source of income once the counter economy starts to form. It also makes it so you're one of like the early ones in your area. So for a little while, you'll be able to obtain quite a bit of money from it. But then competitors will emerge, and you'll everything will be worth more, and there'll be more resources. But what you'll be gaining means less, I suppose, is a good way to put it. But you're still gaining more. And I don't mean like the value of the money goes down or the value of the commodities, um, you know, goes up. I mean, I think you understand.
yeah, I've been following the price of assets. It looks like platinum is actually starting to get its stuff back up, starting to get its act together finally. I mean, I don't own any platinum, but I've been noticing like it's been dropping quite a bit as gold's absolutely skyrocketed. Meanwhile, it looks like the peak of the market climb for crypto has stopped. It's starting to come back down again, nowhere near the level it was like just this time last year.
Well,
So if you,
another
if you
thing to point out for a lot of these so-called crypto skeptics or just gold bug shills is that cryptocurrency is going up more than gold in response to this sort of market uncertainty. So, in fact, it does seem that investors and the general public seems to recognize the utility of cryptocurrency, and it is winning over precious metals.
significantly, like it's not even close. If you want to get into crypto, I would say now would be a pretty good time because, well, it is going down slightly, so it's going to go back up eventually, probably soonish. Now let's
But
see here.
I mean, there are so many just
I,
things which have happened in relation to the economy within the last week. I mean, I'm sort of scared to get off this topic because I'm afraid we'll miss something.
a lot to talk about, and unfortunately, that's actually kind of the problem because you're just gonna miss something. That's just gonna happen.
Fair enough,
Problem is
but
that there's nothing I could really think of in regards to what's coming that we didn't know last week.
I mean, I guess we conveyed the full message of what's going on and the sort of extent to it. I suppose all there really is to say at this point is there's a reason why it's being covered sort of all over the media, and that's not just because they want you to think of it as a sort of milk toast recession. Another reason is obviously because based on the amount of coverage it's seeing and how wide the coverage is, it's a distraction story, and it's obviously intended to distract from a couple of different things which have happened recently. And I've spoken with people, about this, the usual people I speak with when something big happens. A lot of people think it might be what's happening with China and Hong Kong. I don't think that really cuts it either because that's a mainstream narrative as well. No, I think more what they don't want you to focus on is the growing degree by which police are starting to surveil people through their own phones without them even knowing about it, through technology created by a CIA front group known as Planter. Well, and they're the ones that are producing it, but
When aren't the CIA involved?
I don't know why they're, people even are okay with them being around, considering literally any time their name gets brought up, it's something to do with an assassination or something that it comes out that, in the case of Operation Orion, they started drugging people who have mental illnesses to try and get them to become mass shooters. They take control of the media and use this to push hegemonic master narratives. In the case of Operation Mockingbird, yeah. And then they are planning to murder American civilians and then blame it on the Cuban government in the case of Operation Northwoods. I mean, I just name an example. There's really none that are even good that you can point to, which most people would think of. Oh yeah, that's certainly is a representation of my interests.
But SO, the CIA works in the best interest of the United States of America. You're not unpatriotic, are you?
But fuck, there was another one I just learned about recently. I forgot the name of, but yeah, it was. God damn it! I don't even. We'll talk about it on the next episode because I was just starting to do research into it.
Alright.
For some reason I can't even think of what it was, but it was something on the scale of Operation Orion. It was something about the CIA fucking with the domestic population to try and get them to engage in behaviors which further suited the state's interests, which was divorced from those of the people whom they were exploiting.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Now,
next story, I guess.
I was going to actually go on more about the program Palantir. I believe you referred to it as Planter before.
Palantir, Planter, either way, it sucks.
It's absolutely terrible. So you kind of glossed over it, but I wanted to get into it some more. So what it was is that it's a computer program, sort of, that is meant to predict behavior. And what it was originally designed to do was to protect U.S. troops in the Middle East in places like Fallujah. It monitored people's traffic activity, like cell phone, internet traffic, and tried to predict when they would do things like plant roadside bombs to, prevent that from happening to save U.S. troop lives. But now they're planning on implementing that in the United States to basically do what we talked about last week.
Predict who would or wouldn't become criminals, which I can't believe I glossed over that part. Yeah, the concept of pre-crime is a big deal. Why the fuck didn't I mention that? I think it's because the fucking I got there's the surround sound on the fucking TV is so loud it's making it difficult to concentrate. But yeah, so the concept of pre-crime is coming to America. Yay, late stage sadism.
That's going to be very unpleasant for so many reasons. And we already know that Silicon Valley, like this came out last week, that Silicon Valley is preparing their own form of social credit, where they're going to give you scores or give you like a rating based on how much of a good boy you are. Now, of course, they said that this good boy rating is going to be based entirely on user reviews, sort of like how Uber rates its passengers. But I think we all know that this system is not going to exclusively be user to user. That said, it's like we already have stories coming out like every other day of a guy posting a meme on Facebook or something. Like, why the hell are you posting memes on Facebook now? Come on, man. But anyways, yeah, we already see stories every other day of people being subject to red flag laws being enforced by the FBI for some reason, coming in to enforce state laws. That is to say, state red flag laws. The FBI. Yeah, it's already federal legislation. Come on, guys.
Yeah,
But
and
yeah,
then
this
there's
is.
the specific story I think you were referring to was that guy in Maine who is like a former veteran who got shot because somebody like reported his son posting a meme to social media, and that apparently was enough to get a red flag warrant issued. And they came to his house, and when they came to his house, being cops being cops, they just ended up shooting him, and he was unarmed.
I don't remember the shooting part, but I do remember that story specifically. But
I
that
may
said,
be
it's like,
confusing a couple of them, but yeah, there was a story involving red flag laws where somebody was yeah, I know definitively this one ended up in getting the victim shot, but yeah, I think the guy was having a dispute with his neighbor, so then the neighbor thought he was going to be a cheeky little cunt, and he called the police and said that he thought he was a danger to himself and others. So that got a red flag warrant filed, and then when the police came to his house, they shot him.
yeah, I think that was in Maryland actually, and
Well,
that's
that one
kind
was
of.
in Maryland, but yeah, the one in Maine was some guy getting his gun taken away because his kid posted a meme on social media that the government didn't like.
Yeah, and I think we can already see that we can already see where this is going. We have the Minority Report style pre-crimes being set up in police departments. You know, like hell, that's going to be abused, and there's going to be a whole bunch of false flags. Not false flags in the sense of this was deliberately set up, but just in the sense that, like, yeah, the algorithm screwed up and regard this guy who was never hurt a fly as a potential, I don't know, child rapist.
Yeah, and fucking hell, God, I was gonna say something, but then Black Spruce posted his little happy merchant meme there, and it distracted
Back
me.
to you.
Yeah, but okay, what I was on this token, what I was going to say is I was gonna basically just make fun of, you know, boomers when they say, "Oh, well, when they try and take our guns, the police and the military are gonna stand against the government, and people are gonna take up arms and stand against the government, and that's why governments can't be tyrannical." Well, obviously that's divorced from reality because of what we're observing right now, but specifically why that wouldn't ever happen is because people are never, like, the state has created a sort of structural framework which it tries to beat into most people's heads, where nothing the state does can ever not be in their interests. And their interests are inherently tied with the state meeting its interest, which is to subjugate them. But they don't see it that way. So, but my point is, there's never going to be an armed revolt within a state society where the population are siding with the state or perceive the state to be in their interests. That's simply never going to happen because, as we can see, when the state does come and attempt to take your guns, they're not going to see it as gun confiscation, or they'll try and rationalize it as the state working in their interests. And you can't have an armed revolt. You can't have a revolt of any kind if the people um, don't perceive the government to be a threat to their interests. It's actually even more insidious than the sort of tyranny that was experienced under absolute monarchies. I mean, they tried the same thing, but what sort of subverted those systems, as I've gone into before, was the printing press and all these different ideas of religion, because the old world socio-political order was based on religious construction. But yeah, now it's social contracts and all that stuff. So I think that for a practical reason, it would be good to sort of espouse libertarianism and try and get people engaging in counter economics, simply because that's the only way people will ever actually perceive their interests to be different from that of the state. Once the state once they're finding something which is more profitable than what they could ever do in the white markets, and once the state is actually openly, without any pretense otherwise, behaving antagonistically towards their interests.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's really much for me to say about that. I mean, as things goes on, it's going to be more and more blatantly obvious the extent to which the state is ultimately adverse to people's interests, so much so that even government propaganda won't be enough to cure it. It's going to be, you're going to be asking someone to basically believe this is an apple when you are holding an orange.
Material interests trump political beliefs, my dude.
I know. And it's going to be absolutely. And I think this is like the kind of thing that we've been trying to tell people who believe in secessionism for a while now, that ultimately for agorism to work, literally nobody has to be an ideological agorist. All that needs to happen is people find a way to get what they need around the white markets, because getting milk in the white market is going to be too damn expensive. What are people going to do? Pay $50 for a gallon of milk, or 50 cents? Obviously, I'm only using the dollar currency as an example rather than the actual medium of exchange, to just demonstrate how expensive it's going to be in the white market in question.
Yeah, and that's probably a great example to point to, because if you look at actually, what happened, the price of, farm product and agriculture, because of tariffs and largely because of that flood that happened in the Midwest as well, um, that caused the price of, yeah, these cow products to go up significantly. Milk is still like, I think, $2.50, $3 around where I live as of right now. But yes, if you want an actual good quality steak, it's like $40 fucking. It's ridiculous. But
Yeah, and around where I am, the price of milk varies wildly. There's some brands that are $5, and then you just walk over to the next shelf, like literally 5 feet away, and you can get a gallon of milk for like $2.
But what I was gonna say about that, though, is that I know as a matter of fact that counter economics would be able to significantly reduce the price of actually shopping in these stores, because um, I don't know how many other people do this, but my family, we actually do buy our beef products from like local farmers who butcher their cows. And yeah, it's a gray market exchange. It's so gray market that the meat that we buy is wrapped in plastic, which they label not for sale. But yeah, we are able to undercut the prices of like the grocery store significantly by doing that, and we get better quality cuts at the same time. So that's probably going to be one of the first areas I think in total economic collapse, which the sort of counter market is framed around. I know that because right now that's what a lot of people are doing.
I haven't really checked my area, but I do know that there's a lot of ranching where I am. So I suspect that there's going to be a very large supply of meat come the collapse of the economy. It's going to be magnificent. I mean, you can already get meat. I mean, I actually haven't bothered shopping for it in a long time, actually. But if I were to hazard a guess, I would say it's probably in the $10 range, probably 15.
Yeah, you can buy a whole cow for like $500, and that can, like, we've never actually completely finished one, but it's last like years, just one of them.
The whole
So
cow?
yeah, the whole cow. That's what we buy.
No, I mean, like, did you kill the cow and then start eating its meat, and it takes years to go through it, or
No, we didn't like no. They slaughtered it and then they chopped it up, and we got specific cuts out of that, or we get specific cuts out of that, and then yeah, they just give us all the parts.
and that lasts years?
Yeah, the last one, like, we just bought another one recently, but the last one was like a year and a half.
Damn, for $500. That's amazing value. Faithless Berserker just asked you to do a slaughter a video for Ancapistan on camera.
For 10,000 subscribers, yeah, I could probably hit up the guy that I buy these cuts from, and yeah, we could record something like that. I don't know how many people would actually want to see it, but
I mean, I'll just tell you right now, I wouldn't.
yeah, I'm probably not going to do that realistically, but
Okay, calm down, Corn. I'm talking to Black Spruce here.
all right. But so are we gonna move on, or what even was the subject we were talking about? I
I think
kind
we
of
kind
got
we
off
were
track.
I think we lost track of it, but I remember we were talking about Palantir and talking about how that's going to be used for basically thought crimes.
Oh well, yeah, like what we're observing right now with social media, and I'm even starting to see a similar trend in streaming services like Netflix or Hulu. I think increasingly that distributed networks and more subversive means of associating, rather than just competitive firms, are going to start emerging and becoming triumphant, because I think that people are increasingly realizing that yeah, competition itself isn't just going to cut it. You need to completely subvert the entire system in order to actually get rid of these problems. And thank God people are starting to wake up to the fact that the state wanting the FCC to nationalize the internet effectively is not going to do anything other than, take the problems that we have now and exacerbate them hundreds of times over. But I think that, the point that I was trying to make, though, is that we can observe people practicing counter economics now. It's already beginning to happen. In fact, there are a couple of countries in the world which are already perfect examples of what Kevin Carson described as hollow states, particularly Greece and Venezuela, where most of the economic activity occurs in gray and black markets there. And governments are entirely dependent on debt or nationalized reserves. And of course, that's not going to last forever.
I
So,
heard Albania has also a massive, massive economy. Like 40% of their economy is counter economic as well.
yeah, it's just, I can't really understand why people would say that this isn't realistic. We can observe it happening right now. Like, just to say that
Our
agorism is not enough, that's completely disassociated from observable reality, quite literally.
our praxis is so simple. You just have to go to the store and buy a gallon of milk. That's our praxis. And the idea that it can't subvert the state. I mean, if that were true, then Venezuela. I mean, Venezuela's a perfect example. They're absolutely struggling now. Their government is completely impotent,
Yeah, their
and to a
government
lesser
is
extent,
sorry, just yeah,
yeah, just good.
their government is entirely dependent on oil reserves, and because of their oil reserves, they're essentially propped up as a proxy by a couple other big states in the world.
Yeah, and you can see this. You can see this in several other countries as well. Russia, as you know, has entire communities that exchange entirely using crypto, which, by the way, is illegal, and the government can't do anything about it.
By communities, you mean towns, because yeah, when you say communities, it sort of creates the image of the mental image, at least for me, of a neighborhood. But no, to emphasize, yes, these are entire towns which trade in nothing but cryptocurrency in Russia, even though it's illegal in Russia.
And yeah, once especially things are going to get especially bad, at least for the state, once the economy collapses. I mean, the fact of the matter is that people aren't going to work for the state, the cops, the police, the firefighters, the military, if they aren't getting paid. There may be a couple fanatics who just think it's their patriotic duty to work for the state, but fundamentally, like they got to put food on the table. They got to keep their families fed. They got to live in a house, and unless they personally want to conquer that stuff and basically become entirely self-sufficient, well, I mean, they couldn't be self-sufficient if they wanted for the government because all that time spent working for the government is time that they aren't spent doing things like farming.
Well,
So it's not going to work.
the other problem with that is even if you did have a small group of fanatics, which even, at that point, it's basically them versus the rest of the country, so good luck with that. But yeah, even if you had a small group of fanatics, the problem is because the government can't obtain resources, they're not going to be able to actually, supply a police force. So I mean, it's realistically that's even a bit shaky. That's an assertion made on shaky grounds because yeah, it's dubious as to whether or not police would even be able to function in most. They definitely wouldn't be functioning in small towns, but
Oh no, like we were scouting out places just a few days ago, and we found several towns just in the small region we were looking at that just straight up didn't have police stations. And of course, these are towns that are going to have like 100 to 250 people, which, I mean, I've lived in one of those towns for 6 years when I was younger. Yeah, there's no police at all. If
which by the
you need to
way,
call 911, they have to come from a town.
that, by the way, is a another increasing trend which we've seen in recent years. Small towns getting rid of quote unquote their police stations, but let's be honest. In reality, it's not because the people decided to get rid of them. Because no, if the state wanted benefited from them being there, they would be there. Um, no, the reason why is because they were no longer able to sustain a police force in these areas. Which, by the way, for anyone who lives on any of the coasts, a great counter-economic activity which we were looking into would be catching crabs, either red rock crabs or dungeon crabs, at low tides. They sort of they'll get washed up in the tide pools. Crab meat on the coast is like $35 a pound, and when you go further inland, it's around $60 to $70 a pound. So, if you do, if and at the very start of low tide, You can very easily find 5 or 6 of them pretty consistently. I know this because I did this on vacation one time. But yeah, so yeah, you could pretty easily make a good living doing that as an agorist exchange, and it's very low effort. I mean, what's a crab
I
gonna do?
mean,
Run?
well, what you're gonna do is just set crab traps. They come in every tide, and you sell them, and yeah. And I think I remember talking about before. I don't remember if you addressed this or not. You can bring those inland, hire drivers to do it, and you can increase the sale price by like double or even triple.
Yep. Law of comparative advantage. Take that, protectionists. It's a tangible example of that working that most people would be able to take advantage of personally.
It's yeah, the market just straight up benefits everyone. Of course, don't tell that to the fascists who think like, oh, we can just produce everything we want inside. Of course, this includes the protectionists in general.
But
But anyways, let's
any
see here. What else
yeah,
were we?
should we move on to the next story?
Yes, the U.S. has unleashed the military to fight fake news.
Oh yeah, this was getting covered by some second stream channels like Tim Pool as well.
I think
how
it's. I think
how are like I made a joke about this not too long ago, and I screenshotted it where um people were joking in the sort of FNet group chat, which, by the way, I announced in my recent video that we had an announcement regarding FNet. I guess I sort of downplayed the significance, but we have more people on the team now, and anyone who's interested, yeah, it's an open network. So if you think you can contribute something, then you can go ahead and ask us, and we'll probably let you in. But yeah, what I was going to say, I God damn it, your fucking meme distracted. That's
people are
happening.
posting memes.
That happened a lot. That's happening a lot tonight. Sorry, but yeah, okay, now I remember where I was going. I made a joke about because somebody brought up Jack Dorsey's Twitter being hacked, and I mentioned I'd love to see somebody get into Trump's Twitter and make him say some really racist stuff. And see the reaction that would come out of that if he were to tweet out something like "Make America White Again."
Oh, if he did that, that would be amazing. But I think we've already decided that if we somehow did get that power, we basically just use them to black pill everybody.
Yeah, talk about these CIA programs and the libertarian class dichotomy.
Mhm.
But anyway, one of the things that I mentioned, because I was sort of like writing like fake quotes, was something along the lines of, "We need the government to step in and take complete control of the media to stop the spread of fake news." Well, less than a week later, that actually happened, and that was something I was originally joking about. I mean, at this point, parody is reality. There's very the line between them, I would say, doesn't exist. At least when it comes to politics. You're gonna say
Yeah, I'm
something?
not.
I mean, what is there to say about that? Unleashing the military to combat fake news. So, in other words, people
Yeah,
saying things the government deems to be unacceptable.
pretty much. I mean, I think that's the entire. I think that was the entire purpose of the Russia collusion narrative to begin with, just to cement an idea into people's minds that there is foreign meddling in an election, which there, which it would be absolutely hypocritical for the United States to talk about, since we have evidence of the United States directly intervening in governments and government leadership of other countries like dozens and dozens and dozens of times.
No, they're not scared of people meddling in our elections. What they're scared of is distributed networking and decentralized communication, because that's the underlying narrative that's been there for the entire time that most people overlook. Notice how they're always trying to highlight the fact that well, these groups are spreading these messages through open social media groups. And hold on a moment.
All right. So what I think is going on is that that they're using the collusion narrative to try to justify getting the state to basically control people's thoughts and minds, to control the internet, basically. It's just a post facto justification for internet nationalization, because if they control the internet, they control the networks that people communicate through, control they can control the narrative.
Well, it's
It's
more.
also
It's
something.
more than that. It's also an attempt to try and turn people against decentralized networking, or to make them think that it doesn't function in their interests. That's the underlying point here. Aside from the sort of normalizing of the government seizing greater influence over the internet to try and cement its master narratives, which, as I pointed out in the recent news video, there's no way that they can make that work, because um, the more that they attempt to control these social media outlets, the more users that these social media outlets bleed, because that's sort of what social media is. People don't go there to be spoon fed what the they don't go there to be spoon fed master narratives or what's comfortable. They go there to see new things and to connect and communicate with people. Now that communication has become next to impossible, or will be as the state gains more influence over it than it already has, and as it becomes increasingly difficult to find a more diverse set of content than what would have been distinguishable previously from these cable news outlets, people are going to that's going to turn a lot of people away. I think that the state probably has this, judging by their actions, they have this idea that they can sort of manufacture the consent of the people on these platforms, but that's simply not true. I don't think they really. I think that they're. I think they're misplaying this one.
If they wanted to do it, they would have done it a long time ago, probably like 70 years ago, when that kind of thing actually would have been, tolerable. But nowadays, it's like everybody this is just how a fourth turning usually goes about, that people are going to be skeptical of the old order's narratives and propaganda, so much so that, like, if anything that they do to try to wrest control back, to try to manufacture consent again, going to backfire tremendously. It's only
Yeah,
going to be used as evidence that the old order is unacceptable and must be destroyed.
yeah, that's evidenced by the fact that every time a mass shooting happens, or every time a major political figure dies, almost nobody believes the mainstream narrative anymore. Like, almost immediately after it happens, you'll see the blue check marks if you're using Twitter, but just mainstream personalities in general, sort of you know engaging in slacktivism, or trying to show their half-assed support. But most of the actual non-state actors and the people who aren't connected to the state, they're sitting there, and they're dissecting inconsistencies, and they're pointing out things to be skeptical of. And for good reason too, because as we pointed out earlier, the CIA is pretty much on record, yeah, staging mass shootings and terrorist attacks to try and shape a socio-political order and normalize the idea of governments expanding their influence over a certain area of society. That's how they think.
Yeah. I mean, there's not really much for me to add again.
I just scroll up to look at that Virgin Yang versus Chad McAfee meme.
Honestly, I'm kind of the way that the Virgin and the Chad meme has kind of evolved kind of annoys me because the way it was originally supposed to be presented is that like yeah, both of them are bad, just bad in different ways. The Virgin is basically a cuck, while the Chad is basically a
Yeah,
sociopath.
the Virgin is weak, but the Chad is at the very least interesting and stands out. You know, they have
But he,
a character to them. But yeah,
yeah,
now people have begun using it to sort of like they unironically try and use that to argue selling points for whatever position they like over another.
hmm like well, I think there was one of the original Virgin versus Chad memes, the Virgin, the Virgin Drive versus the Chad Plow. The one who basically just just drives in random directions with his half his body out the window at all times.
The Virgin Walk versus the Chad Stride. That's the classic.
That's a classic, yeah. So,
Anyway,
anyways,
so we have more stories to go over, but we're getting close to the end of the stream again.
yeah, I don't know. Like, I kind of wanted to talk about Star Wars now.
All right. I mean, yeah, you mentioned that in the beginning. Some the story for episode 9 leaked apparently, and there's also the fact that you wanted to talk about some of the story elements.
Yeah. So, just a brief overview of what's going to happen is that Leia is going to become Rey's new mentor as a Jedi because apparently Rey still needs a mentor for some reason, even though she achieved the peak of her power right away. Also, Leia is a trained Jedi Master now for some reason. Also, Kylo Ren is looking for something called the Wayfinder. It's supposed to be the new MacGuffin, which he is able to get fairly quickly, and this leads him to the unknown regions where he finds the Senate. And the Senate is still alive after all this time. After Episode 6, when Darth Vader went into the shaft into the main reactor of the Death Star, and he freaking exploded. Yeah, he survived that somehow. And he's about ready to try to reconquer the galaxy using a fleet of Death Star destroyers. That's the term used in the leaked documents, that they are Star Destroyers, like Imperial Star Destroyers, but with Death Star super lasers. Now, to be fair, these did exist before, but there was the Conqueror class Star Destroyer, which is basically a Star Destroyer, but with a super laser dish attached to it. It was supposed to be like useful for anti-ship combat as well as basically cracking continents, but there was only the one ship. Here they apparently have a giant fleet of them, a giant fleet of Death Star destroyers. Like, that is probably the dumbest thing I have ever heard.
Yeah, I mean, it's not very often that, just by the trailer that comes out of a movie, you can tell it's going to be worse than The Last Jedi, because there usually aren't that many series which have something as awful as The Last Jedi added to their canon. And there aren't
Yeah,
that many series which survive after something as awful as The Last Jedi is put out. But yeah, I mean, if the new trailer which just came out didn't confirm how bad this is gonna be, um, the new script really, it's Yeah, that should really just, send the message home. I mean, they somehow out Jedi'd. They somehow outlast Jedi'd the last Jedi.
Somehow. And that's like only Act 1 and halfway through Act 2. Act 2 is going to conclude with Rey becoming sad and trying to exile herself, literally doing exactly what Luke did in The Last Jedi, where, like, yeah, everything that's really terrible is all my fault. So instead of, actually doing something about it, I'm just going to sit on a rock and just wait to die because reasons.
But yeah, this
And
it doesn't. I don't know. We haven't seen anything which suggests it's going to be a lot of the same story elements. Probably will, but yeah. I mean, with what we have here, we have, in the same, it's the same problem in the sense that, the last Jedi had a huge problem on the series canon, and well, had a huge problem with it, I should say. But yeah, so we can already see that this is even worse. It's as if Disney we're listening to all of the complaints and we're like, oh, you don't like that, motherfuckers? Well, too bad. IP law is a thing. Which, yeah, I
you're
still.
gonna hate if you hated Last Jedi, then you're going to hate this.
It's like they were listening to everything people were complaining about in The Last Jedi and just amped those specific parts of the movie up to 10. But
Yeah, well
yeah,
then what happens then is I wasn't finished with like what's gonna happen in the story.
alright. So,
So what happens next is that after Rey becomes sad, she gets a pep talk by Force Ghost Luke, and that makes her feel better again. Yay! Doing exactly what they did in The Last Jedi when Luke got a pep talk by Ghost Yoda for some reason, and that made him actually want to start doing stuff again. Kylo Ren turns back to the light side for some reason. That happens, and Han Solo becomes a Force Ghost. Yeah, that's going to be a thing.
even though nothing indicated that he was Force sensitive, in fact, in Episode 4, he didn't even believe in the Force.
I mean, there's been fan theories that he's Force sensitive, but that's never been confirmed, and he's never demonstrated anything resembling Force sensitivity. That said, yeah, that's apparently going to be a thing, and then Rey and Kylo Ren are going to join forces to confront the Emperor, who apparently planned this stuff all along. And because he's old as hell, he actually can't himself. But what he wants to do is to try to get both of them to fall to the dark side, so they can succeed him as emperor and rule over the new empire together.
This is so fucking
Because
stupid. Holy shit. This is
that
almost
because
like
that worked.
Tumblr fan fiction territory level bad here.
I mean, did hasn't seduced young light side users been exactly what almost killed you before, Sheev? I mean, now.
Sheev's
Plus,
entire
I mean,
Palpatine, as much as I love the way he's portrayed, his storyline is just, let's be honest, it's just complete bullshit. It's just like his entire story and everything that he does is basically just creating inconsistencies which are explained post ad hoc by other arbitrary explanations of he somehow was able to foresee this, and that's why this happened, even though at the time this didn't make sense, and it could only make sense if this arbitrary explanation was taken into consideration, that he somehow knew it was going to happen in advance.
it's so stupid. There's just it's Yeah, and I think everybody knows what's going to happen. It's like Ray, Kylo, and Force Ghost Luke, and Force Ghost Leia. Yeah, she dies in this movie, so to nobody's great surprise. They all join forces and they destroy the Emperor once and for all.
And then everyone stood and clapped.
And then everyone stood and clapped, and yeah, we can be, because he definitely didn't die in episode 6, and we're definitely not bringing him back because of fan service, so we can be absolutely sure he's dead for real this time, you guys. Freaking
And apparently they've announced that there's a new trilogy. That's not necessarily news, but yeah, this trilogy doesn't feature lightsabers. It's like they really don't understand what they're doing.
they
Or they're
clearly don't. I mean, I understand that J.J. Abrams and George Lucas brought in to help in a bit of a pickle because of the amount of damage that The Last Jedi did to not only the storyline but to the canon in general.
you
I can think
cannot
of so
have
many freaking plot holes that exist in canon, by the way. That's like, Sheev, you should know better. I mean, the rule of two is canon. You
Right.
should know that they're not gonna rule together. And you should know that they're going to go after you. Because it's happened before.
You should also know you can't have Star Wars without lightsabers. That would be like having Star Trek without the Enterprise.
I mean, you can have it, but it's like you gotta have there's several things that are
The
just
entire
iconic to the
uni-
setting that it just
the
doesn't work
entire
without it.
the entire universe is built around it, though. Not necessarily lightsabers, but like
The
Jedi,
Force.
Sith, Force sensitive people. Yeah, that's kind of what sets this universe apart from just being generic sci-fi. Oh shit, did it freeze?
No, it's it was just quiet for a moment. I thought you were finished.
I thought the tab fucking froze. But anyway, we've been streaming for over an hour now, so do we have any other stories or final thoughts maybe to go over?
I just want to make some final thoughts on the sequel trilogy, and that is that, I mean, it's been confirmed that Episode 7 was produced and made without any sort of planning whatsoever. Basically, just doing whatever they want. Now, for certain writers, like having a storyline progress organically, or even the writer can be surprised on what characters do because they get into the mindset of what their characters and what their characters will do. That can make a very entertaining and enriching storyline. But it's very clear that this was planned out in the sense that it was not planned out at all. J.J. Abrams created all sorts of mystery boxes like the origins of Snoke or Rey's family or all that stuff, and just didn't even have an answer for it. There was no communication at all between him and Rian Johnson whatsoever, and the result is an utterly incomprehensible mess. I mean, there are a lot of writing problems with the prequel trilogy, don't get me wrong, but it was cohesive. It made sense. Things progressed from one thing to the other. And at this point, like the sequel trilogy or the prequel trilogy resonates with today's times. I mean, let's just be honest, it totally does. I don't think of any period of time where the sequel trilogy is going to resonate. It's just going to be a forgotten piece of dumpster fire that is going to be looked upon with mockery in much the same way that the Zelda CDI franchise is looked upon with mockery and derision by the Legend of Zelda fans. What's going to happen is that once the state collapses, people are going to start creating their own Star Wars series, and people with the best ideas are going to start making feature-length movies, video games, or just their own kinds of storylines, and they're going to be absolutely magnificent. The kinds of just
Oh yeah,
people are going to love.
I'd even thrown out the idea with a couple guys in FNet to sort of to start after FNet, one of the projects we could start that sort of works around decentralized networking, which would encourage a lot of people to sort of increasingly look upon this model with favor, would be to take the old Republic trailer and make a game like that, actually how they advertised the game looking. But yeah, just what I was going to say is, yeah, I think Star Wars right next to Windslayer or any of these other franchises which were either killed or made significantly worse by mismanagement from another bigger company which bought the property. I think that this is a good case against IP law. Star Wars is hands down the best case against it.
Well, yeah. And I think that's about all the time we have. I cannot wait for IP laws to be destroyed, and we can get the episode 7, 8, and 9 that we actually deserve.
Yeah, the community that actually, like the sort of fan group around Star Wars, I picture that it'll just sort of be by consensus that those movies are non-canon, the ones made by Disney.
It's gonna be non-canon like almost immediately.
It has to be. They create so many inconsistencies that even their attempts to sort of post hoc bullshit their way through it really is not working out for them. It just creates more questions than answers, if anything.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time.